Hello, and welcome to our news broadcast. Here we are. As per usual, this is Basils Imperial News Network. Welcome, and I am your host, Casimir Basilius, here to bring you the latest galactic news of GSAC G1. Here we are. Unfortunately, we are ever so slightly unprepared, but we are scheduled to broadcast, so here we are. Unfortunately, we sent our conscripts off to gather news reports. And we made the little mistake of sending our conscripts to, well, we sort of have a report on this. Here we are. We sent our conscripts for a local news story. As I'm sure you know, or maybe you don't, our broadcasts, they end with a local news story. I say local. By that I mean, from galactic standards. Well, the local news broadcast was about the Elysian New Year, and our conscripts decided to simply, well, partake in the festivities as opposed to get our reports done. So, we're a bit unprepared because of that. But that's just how it goes. Theoretically, our next news report should be a bit more prepared because there shouldn't be anything to distract our conscripts. Anyway, I suppose we'll start with the closing news story, because they did get that done. Earlier this week, Elysians, that's humans, by the way, celebrated their New Year's event. Despite the Galactic Standard Calendar, current, well, how do I put it? Our date's different than your date. The current star date here, well, in order to check that, let's pop on over here. It's 11/8, 7894, as you can see, the 11th day of the 8th month. As such, well, hopefully that's not doing that anymore. Yes, it's nowhere near the New Year's here. But it is New Year's on the old Elysian homeworld. And the Elysians, even in our galaxy, have celebrated the orbit of their homeworld around its star, claiming that it is now the year 2024 by their old calendar system. As we know, the unified galactic standard system that our galaxy uses differs from their calendar, both in amount of days in a month and year, and in, well, no, pretty much that. And of course, the day and day and overall year and all that. As this is our Tuesday news broadcast, it's actually Thursday here, and so forth. Anyway, it just goes to show that local nations, such as the Elysians and so forth, do celebrate their own minor holidays, as do many other nations, along with having their own currencies and all that, while the Galactic Standard System has unified, well, most things with its standardized system, such as date, currency, measurements, all of that. Anyway, I believe it's also today, specifically, is the Elysian holiday of Sci-Fi Day. And of course, well, I mean, Sci-Fi Day. As opposed to alternate dimensional Elysians, this is sci-fi. Anyway, so yes, a partial report from our conscripts on the holiday that they decided to celebrate instead of get our reports on. We also have one interesting report. It was half compiled. Luckily, I have the files in front of me. Here we are. So we have a report on sort of, it's a special report, honestly. It doesn't really fit into any of our former sections. Perhaps it's its own analysis segment or something? It doesn't really fit in any segments. Anyway, I suppose it kind of fits into economy and commerce, sort of, just due to this fact. We've seen a large increase in the production of air and ocean-based military assets across the galaxy. As a recently released report by the former Council nations, well, one of the scientific groups within the former Council nations, basically indicated that these often considered outdated assets may still have a place on the modern battlefield. It was long thought that the prevalence of advanced assets, such as space fleets, starships, and starfighters, made the use of older assets redundant. But much as how tanks have remained a staple of the battlefield despite mechs and autonomous anti-armor weaponry, the same may be said of ocean-based fleet assets and atmospheric air assets. Modern starfighters, often able to operate in atmosphere, with high speeds, heavier armament, and more survivability than their atmospheric predecessors, made it considered more viable to produce mainly space-capable fighters, both from a point of larger system defense, being able to strike enemy orbital assets, being able to deploy starfighters in an invasion-based role for the defense of invasion space assets, and assault of enemy space assets, and strike missions on ground-based assets without risking capital vessels. However, it has been found that in the field of cost, sensor range, and maneuverability of atmospheric vessels, they outclass starfighters. We are still likely to see starfighters produced and used in atmosphere, of course, but many former Council nations, having received this report, seek to increase production of their older atmospheric aircraft lines and ocean-based vehicle lines. This has, of course, increased, corporate production of such assets. It's not like such assets didn't exist, but they were put on the back burner. Many times, atmospheric aircraft commands and ocean-based fleet commands were looked down upon due to these facts. As for fleets, we covered aircraft. Let's cover fleets. It was long thought for fleets, ocean-based vessels, and the like, that they were just absolutely outclassed by, well, starcraft, specifically, capital ships. Capital ships can land in oceans, of course. And it was long thought that naval vessels were simply inferior. However, recent, cost reports and new advances in ship-based anti-orbital stealth technology have increased the viability of ocean-based fleets. Unfortunately, to a lesser degree than atmospheric aircraft, but ocean-based fleets are technically viable. Orbital strikes against them are far more difficult to pull off with the new anti-orbital stealth devices, basically making it harder to scan, track, and hit a ocean-based vessel from orbit. Combined with the vessel's movement, anti-missile defenses, advancements in energy shielding technology and such things, decoys, drones, all this makes ocean-based vessels far harder to engage from orbit, thus increasing their viability. Of course, ocean-based vessels have always been viable in self-policing operations and in minor nations that contain less space fleets. And that kind of situation, ocean-based fleets have always been viable. They've had a role in those, but not in all-out warfare. Or at least it wasn't thought that they had a area for that anymore. But these new advances are proving that wrong. Of course, the same goes for atmospheric aircraft. It's not like they weren't around, it was just that they weren't considered viable in greater scale warfare. Mostly, once again, because of their the challenges compared to the presumed superiority of starfighters. But cost effectiveness is proving that they can theoretically be used in large-scale galactic war, as opposed to simply self-policing, planetary conflict, and those kind of things, which is what their main role was before. Corporate disputes, mostly corporate-based, honestly. Some militaries ran them for anti-corporate operations, but most of those types of vehicles were limited to basically planet-based minor operations. But that might change given this new report. Of course, the report was supposed to come out sooner. Admittedly, there's a lot of history behind the use and then falling off of such assets. Such assets were large in the First Galactic War. Aircraft were seen, by aircraft we of course mean atmospheric only, and naval vessels, but only generally during the closing years of the First Galactic War. They were in operation after the First Galactic War, but were slowly phased out again. Then at the start of the Second Galactic War, they were mostly phased out by that time, as they were seen as, obsolete. Now, theoretically, the report would have come out sooner, honestly, but, with the collapse of the Council and all that, the Council's report only recently came out. Of course, there are factions that don't focus on such things, and there are factions that do. For instance, the insectoids don't generally focus on that kind of warfare. Not to say that they don't have equivalents. Of course, giant ocean-based bugs and the like do exist. Flying bugs exist and all that. But of course there's lesser nations that do and did continue to field such things. Like I said, it's not like those assets were absolutely ignored. They just weren't seen as viable by the majority of the major nations. The borders you see on our map here. Specifically, the Commonwealth being xenophobic, didn't really have need for such assets. They don't, despite being very militaristic and xenophobic, the Commonwealth doesn't really invade other nations, and they have most of their worlds under control. So they never really saw a need for such vessels on a large scale. Federation of Allied Nations has a prevalence of them, same with the Council, but they were slowly phased out as somewhat obsolete. And, a variety of other factions have their amounts and all that. Anyway, like I said, unfortunately, our conscripts didn't provide us very much to work with this week. Hopefully, next week we will have a proper script written out by our conscripts, fully researched with interviews and all that. But, I mean, it's Elysian New Year, and so to all of our, well, 2 days since it, but for all of our Elysian viewers out there, Happy New Year's. For all of our Galactic viewers out there, it's not New Year's, is it? Except, I suppose there are worlds out there. Look, there's like billions of worlds out there. I'm sure there are some worlds in which it is New Year's. More than just the Elysians. But, by Galactic standard calendar system, it's like nowhere near. Anyway, what other things did our conscripts provide us? Not much else. Unfortunate. Let's see whether I can't find some news on the net. The data net, that is. Here we are. The Omnicorp point combat templates war continues. Oh no, wait. Yeah. The point combat template Omnicorp war continues. It's a minor war on a few scattered worlds. It's not really of too much importance, apparently. Several governments have gotten involved in it. Specifically, one government has gotten involved in it against Omnicorp, which is shocking. Well, not really direct warfare, but just siding with point combat templates against Omnicorp, which is an interesting turn. Omnicorp being one of the largest, if not the largest, corporation in the galaxy. So, yeah. Most people would expect them to side with Omnicorp. Of course, we here at our little news network, we support point combat templates, not from an Imperial perspective, of course. The Empire does not acknowledge any non-Imperial corporations, etc., etc. But point combat templates sponsored us once, so, point combat templates. Not to say that if Omnicorp didn't sponsor us, we wouldn't take that. But, I mean, they're Omnicorp, the biggest corporation in the galaxy. So, Anyway. That's going to be about it. Unfortunately, like I said, our conscripts, didn't finish their report. I suppose on a other aspect, we are working on 2 new series. Well, 1 new series should be out. Is it? Let me double check our schedule. Yes. Very, very good. On your Elysian 30th? 23rd to 30th. Not actually sure which one. But on one of those 2 of this month, we will be having yes, on your Elysian month of January, we will be having our first lore video in which we will cover FTL and how it all works. And also, we'll have a special, well, theoretically, if we can get it done, we'll have a special miscellaneous broadcast on one of these Tuesdays after our news stream. Of course, same with the lore video will be after the news. Not this news, like I said, later in the month. So those are our two new series. They will be on Tuesdays after news, once a month each. So at the end of each month, there will be lore videos. And in the middle of each month, there will be a random miscellaneous special project. Hopefully. Anyway, in other news, we have some new map trackers. I know this isn't really news related. It's more outside news related than anything, but we'll go over to here real fast just so I can oh, there we go. We have new map markers. Custom made. By custom made, I mean I drew a lot of the little pictures on them, but we have basically for city mapping, making city mapping a lot easier because city mapping had problems. I'm sure you know. I mean, it's not like we're not going to map cities the complex way. We still will. But mapping unimportant parts of cities takes a lot of work for little gain. So we have a vague map token system that we can use to map things out far quicker with less memory usage. And yes, just far quicker with less memory usage. We will still make advanced city maps, but this basically allows us to fill in unimportant areas. And along with our new tokens, for instance, like just some examples, here's our space elevator. We will be, theoretically, if we can get it set up, making these tokens into a pack. And then just, giving out the token pack for little map trackers or whatever you want to use them for. I don't know, whatever you want to use them for. But we currently have about, let's see, a few. I'd say like 50 or so. Yes, we have 50 or so map tokens. Little circles with little representative images in them that theoretically will work on getting put into a pack and available. I mean, they're not really the best, but I find them useful for, city maps. Got that sort of, what do you put it? How do you put it? The way I use them anyway, has a sort of, reminds me a bit of city skylines or Sim City to a degree. Because, you got your zones with each color, blue for commercial, green for residential, and yellow for industrial, and all that. And red for government. And other such things like municipal and what else did we have? Infrastructural, add-ons, municipal, that kind of thing. Oh, and transit. We do have some transit things like train stations, logistics stations. What else did we have? Train, logistics, subway, bus stops. Just a bunch of little tokens that we'll try and get into a pack. Anyway, where's our conclusion thing? Yeah. That concludes this news broadcast. Basil's Imperial News Network for all your galactic news of GSAC G1. We hope you have a good day.